What's up, everybody? I'm a 20-something-year-old white guy. I got a copy of D&D. I'm wearing a D&D shirt. What the fuck do you think we're talking about? So today, in light of some recent experiences with playing Old School Essentials, I'm going to have to talk about when you are supposed to cut a session short as a dungeon master and maybe reevaluate because things have gone so horribly wrong, or just is getting bogged down. You've introduced concepts that are too heavy. Something's going wrong. You have a disconnect with your players. It sucks. So we're going to talk about Old School Essentials a little bit. This is pretty much basic Dungeons & Dragons. It's like BX. Some people call it BECMI, BECMI. It's the basic expert version of Dungeons & Dragons that happened before Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition. But this applies to pretty much any version of D&D and pretty much any RPG that I can think of. So if you're playing like fucking Shadowrun 3, these versions of D&D, whatever, it's going to also apply. So to give some context, we were second session of a drop-in, drop-out game of BX that is, I don't want to give away too much information, too much identifying information, but it was sort of a starter dungeon, which was kind of a problem because in this party, this really isn't necessarily the DM's fault explicitly, but he should have played his audience a little bit better, maybe kicked me and a few other people out of the game. Not because we were being disruptive or disrespectful, but because our experience level was a little bit different. Basically what we had was myself, and I've been playing basic D&D and advanced D&D for a tremendous amount of time, especially online. I've been doing a lot of play-by-post stuff, and I also used to play second edition in person. So it's probably been like more than 10 years now, where I've been playing games like Labyrinth Lord, basic D&D, advanced D&D. So I'm not a very good player still. I kind of suck. But I've kind of seen a lot of the tropes, and maybe that would be an issue. We had a couple of people there who were big 5th edition players, which is sort of a blessing and a curse, because at least they weren't like 4th edition players, which I think is a good game. I have it right here, actually. They weren't like 4th edition players, though, where everything is sort of like a video game style of combat. But at the same time, 5th edition is liberated in different ways that basic isn't, and that causes a lot of problems. The rule system of 5th edition is inherently flawed and kind of sucks, and I'm going to make a video about that in the future, but it breeds a certain kind of player that probably can't play anything before 3rd edition. So that was also an issue, that we had so many 5th edition players. And then we had some people who had not played a role-playing game, at least not formally, before as well. And they hadn't played like Warhammer or any kind of skirmish game either. So it was really a mixed bag of players, which isn't a huge problem as long as there's something for everybody. But there just kind of wasn't. And I'll explain some relevant details as we go along, just so that I'm not giving you expository information forever. But we began the game, and he was trying to do like one of those slapdash basic kind of introductions, like the whole like you meet at a tavern thing, with a little bit of a twist. So we went to a tavern, and this might give away what module it is. I haven't read the module myself because the game's sort of still ongoing. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue with it, but we go to a tavern, and within there is a bunch of corpses, or there are rather a bunch of corpses. People have all butchered each other, and all that it seems that they were fighting over was a map, like some kind of a treasure map. And our party has done odd jobs together, so we find the map, and we're going to go investigate. And this is kind of a weird way to introduce somebody for the first time into a role-playing game, because you have a situation where the players cannot even talk to each other and become comfortable with being ridiculous in character before you start getting into the combat elements of the game. So you aren't starting right with combat, but you're starting with the dungeon master talking at you for 10 minutes, and then you're already on the road somewhere. And I find that's kind of weird. And our he also said that our party had done tasks together, but didn't give us experience for that, and also didn't explain exactly what it is that we'd done, and nobody really filled that in either. And we were also level 1, which is kind of strange. That's just a kind of an irrelevant point, right? That is a nitpick, but also there as well. So the more experienced players were kind of like, what? Not so much me. I've been in some weird games before, but that was something that I also picked up. So we start off on this road towards wherever we're going, which one of us was some kind of like a cartographer or something. So he looked at the map and said it's like going to be in a cliffside somewhere. Okay, so we're going. It's got to be important. People were killing each other for it. Let's go find out what's there. So we start to walk, and the DM just rolls a bunch of dice. So we're not really able to talk to each other or anything in character. And we get to the side of the cliff, and we walk up. And we start to walk inside, and that's sort of where we gain control of our characters. So I'm trying to introduce myself. My character's name is Victor Avanti. And he's a thief by class, but the reason why he's a thief and why he's a level 1 thief, or at least I thought it was very clever when I figured it out, because he was lawful good as well, is he was a pawn shop owner, or like a used goods store owner. So all of the skills that he would have for his job in terms of like opening a locket to try to find what's inside of it after purchasing it, or opening a chest that somebody had sold to him because they can't open it and he has to kind of sell it, or like small instrument repair, watchmaking, shit like that. That would all be something that would qualify as like meticulous sort of dexterity-based thief skills, but it also could work for somebody who's an artisan, or in his case, because he wasn't very smart, a pawn shop owner. So that's what my character was. The other character that we had was a barbarian, female barbarian of some kind. I think that they were technically a fighter, rules as written, fighting man. But yeah, they behaved pretty much how a barbarian in Pathfinder would. And what else did we have? We had some kind of a mage. They didn't last very long, so they're not super relevant. And then we had another fighter whose character basically looked like a clown. It's not really super relevant which characters existed, because a lot of these problems were relevant to the dungeon master. So we start to play, and instead of just letting us... So there's kind of two ways that you can do a exploration dungeon crawl. One way that you can do it, which is my preferred way, is sort of this like really organic way that people who have been playing for a long time intrinsically understand without reading the rules. But in the rules as written, it's in a dungeoneering chapter in here. And I will yank it out and we will talk about it. So in dungeon adventuring, there is a set sequence of play, which is, this makes it sound a lot more artificial than it is, or than it should be. But the sequence of play per turn, I think a turn is supposed to be about 10 minutes, is there's wandering monsters. So the referee is the dungeon master in Old School Essentials. The dungeon master is going to make a roll of whatever dice, see where it lands on a wandering monster table, and then see if monsters attack you. And if they appear at all, they might actually not attack you. They might be of friendly disposition, or they might not be inherently hostile creatures. So you might run into something. That's what wandering monsters is. The second phase for dungeoneering is the action. So the party's going to make actions like moving, searching, listening, entering rooms. Makes sense. Description, so the referee is going to describe what happens. If monsters are encountered, follow the procedure described in encounters. And end turn. So the referee is going to update the time, so the world time that's passed at 10 minutes. And he's going to pay special attention to light sources, spell durations, and the parties need to rest. And you have to rest, I think, every 5 or 6 turns. It actually can change depending on circumstance, though, so these aren't hard and fast rules. But the the natural way, there's kind of two natural ways that you can do this. One of them is that you get sort of a party token. It can be notional if you're not playing with a board rather, but we were playing with a board, so we're gonna say it's a token. That represents everyone in the party. You establish sort of a marching order of like who's going to be first to contact. So you're going to have like probably like your fighter, then squish your classes behind him. So like fighter, cleric, mage, rogue, or thief, whatever, right? That's going to be your marching order. Your token represents that, and you're going to move around like an adventuring party, kind of in one of those like Japanese RPGs, the really old ones from NES, Super Nintendo, where you see like one character, but it represents all of them. The other way that you can do it is that your characters all stay kind of loosely around each other, and you sort of move around the space asking the Dungeon Master questions. And both of these can go really well. If you have sort of an established caller, like if somebody's playing a paladin especially, you should play with a single token. Because the paladin's they're not going to tell everyone what to do unless they're kind of an asshole, but they will be the face of the party. They will walk around and say what everyone's supposed to be doing, and they will be like the voice of the party. And normally if you have a good paladin player, which I sort of aspire to be, but I'm not. Everyone will just kind of like listen to them as they investigate and stuff, and then the paladin or whatever your caller is will kind of like look back and be like, "There's a lock here. Thief, can you open the lock? Can you identify this magic item to the wizard?" Shit like that. The other way, where everyone's just kind of moving around, that works really well if you have a thief or a rogue in 3rd edition onwards. It would be probably a rogue, and in AD&D and behind, it would be a thief. They aren't really exactly the same, but they kind of serve the same purpose. The reason for that is that a sneakier character, like a thief or a ranger, what have you, will be way up ahead of the party. I shouldn't say way up, but they'll be like tens of meters away from where everyone else is looking, kind of like scouting for things, stealing the loot before anyone can get there, that kind of stuff. But we went with the token, which kind of makes sense because you have newer players. So he places the token on the board, and then he's just talking for like 25 minutes, explaining the rules for this. The Dungeon Master, rather, is explaining the rules for how this sort of dungeon crawl is going to work. And I think that's... It makes sense if you want to know the rules. I have a couple friends who, if you explain the rules to them like that, they will kind of play in like a robotic way, but they'll really enjoy the game and they'll understand it. And they like the whole structured rules and order and shit. But I think for most players, even players like myself who are heavily invested in the rules and we like that, you should learn how to play very organically. Because even before I picked up Old School Essentials, I'd played games like Labyrinth Lord, and I really only read like the player relevant sections of that. And in that, I kind of figured out how a dungeon crawl worked without actually reading the rules explicitly about it. So even when I was brushing up to run a couple games of Old School Essentials myself, when I read the chapter about the dungeon encounters, the dungeon sequence of play rather, it sort of was like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? I sort of understood that system sort of inherently to the point where it was just embedded in my brain. And if you let people just kind of move around the environment and you explain things at interval as a dungeon master, they will understand what the sequence of play is inherently. And especially with new players, when you haven't given them any time to play for 30 minutes into a session, you really should have allowed, I really think that he should have allowed the players to just start moving about and asking questions about the environment. But he explains that to us. We get the party token. And he wants to have the Dungeon Master wants to have a shot caller and a mapper. These are also roles that exist within the game as well, that are described as like hard and fast rules in Old School Essentials. I think that's probably sort of a product of the writing style, where it's a lot of like bullet points. Everything is explained in a very clinical way, which is good for people who have experience with RPGs before, maybe not with newer players. Maybe this was a newer DM, I should have asked him. But we end up with a situation where he asks for a mapper and a caller. So a caller is what I was talking about earlier, where you have like a paladin, a distinct shot caller, some kind of person that has a big personality that can lead the party and make decent decisions. So he's trying to assign that to somebody. This is also something that just comes out naturally with group dynamics. And he wants somebody to be a mapper. So I said that I would be a mapper, and the problem with that is that he wanted me to basically draw perfectly the entire game board, which is not exactly how you should have a mapper working, especially when you're playing online. So this game was on Roll20. The drawing tools are extremely fiddly on Roll20. Normally when you're playing, especially in person, you would have a mapper where you give them a sheet of graph paper and you say, you walk 25 meters, you turn left. You walk 30 meters, you turn right. And they'll kind of just like draw little lines representing the hallways. And it'll end up looking like Rogue or NetRunner, like a game like that, where everything is sort of crudely defined. But if you look at the map, you would be able to navigate out. And then if you're going to try to see if the party is getting lost, you just ask, as a dungeon master, you ask that player, the mapper, for their map. And then you look at it between the map and the module, and if it is approximately correct, then they're not lost. And however fucked it is between the map that they've made and the module, they get progressively more and more lost. So he was telling me to draw the entire board out, like the descriptions of the rooms. And this is a way that people do play, and it works fine in person. I've done it before, where the players like draw the entire board that they're going to fight on. But he's giving these like really, really in-depth decisions where it's like, there's a 150-foot hallway of smooth stone that is 10 feet wide. It has a door at 30 feet on the left side, and then 37 and a half feet on the left side again down the hallway, and they're both arches. And I'm trying to draw this whole fucking map. And this is ridiculous. I'm asking him to like repeat himself over and over. The point of the map is to do with disorientation, right? So you should be like, you're in a hallway. If the players ask you how long it is, you can tell them how long it is. You make sure that the turns are super well delineated, or denoted. You make sure the turns are well denoted so the players know which directions to put on their graph paper. And approximate distances and stuff, but you don't have to be that exact or else it's going to slow down the game. And then when you're going to have a combat encounter, you'll have like a chess-ex battle mat or whatever, and then the dungeon master will kind of like draw the dimensions of the room that you're going to fight in, and then you erase it after, and you go back to kind of like theater of the mind with the mapper. That's sort of how the best way that these things work. But I'm drawing the whole map. The descriptions are way too in-depth, but he's not like trying to make us get lost. Like he's not like firing all these ridiculously complex descriptions at me, and I just have to like get it down as best as I can, and we're just going to get lost, which would actually have been really interesting because I had a negative intelligence character. So that would have been really cool to see because I had like -2 intelligence, -1 intelligence, something like that. And if he just told me like in excruciating detail everything, but he did it really quickly, and I'd have to draw it all out as best as I can, and we'd get more lost because it's so hard for me to perceive the environment. That could have been cool too, but he wasn't doing that. He was just repeating himself over and over, trying to like help me draw the map for him. Really, really weird that he shouldn't have been doing that. The other problem is that they were trying to establish somebody as a caller. Nobody wanted to take the role because there was a lot of new players. People were intimidated because people have been playing 5e for a long time, which I don't play that much. So I said that like I'd played Labyrinth Lord and a lot of like Moldvay Cook BX shit before. So I think that they wanted me to be the caller and the mapper and just kind of play the game for them, which was a problem. I refused to kind of do both. But eventually one of the players established himself as a caller, and they were pretty much the only one talking for a large portion of the rest of the session. The biggest issue was that in this module, when you walk into the first hallway, there is like 4 rooms, and they all have the same shit in them. It's just like statues and coffins. And all the coffins have like skeletons in them. So you end up walking into like a 20 by 20 room, and there's a coffin. And you push the thing off the coffin, and there's like a skeleton. But it's not like a living skeleton, it's dead. It's a decayed skeleton. And you can smash the skeletons, and you can get like rings and loot and all kinds of stuff. But it's not exciting loot because you're right in the middle. So you get like a fucking scimitar. Or some kind of I think the best thing that you get is a ring. And you don't really know what it does. Or at least if we didn't get to the point where we knew what it did. So, not very exciting. 4 exactly identical rooms. And at the end of this hallway, there is a barred door. A big door, it's barred. And it looks like it's been barred from the side that we are on so that it could hold something in, and nothing comes of it. Because after we, an interesting role-playing finally started at the point where we had scoured all of these rooms, and then we got to this barred door. And then we decided, like, okay, there's probably something big, so we went back and we started going through the rooms. And the DM was asking players to be way too specific about their actions to the point where we're slowing down the game. Like, he told me, if you tell me exactly what your player does, you will auto-succeed in finding traps. So when we're rescouring these rooms, and we're going through the coffins and stuff, I have, as you can see, I can ramble forever, right? So I'm saying, like, I take the pommel of my dagger and I'm going to tap it against the side of the coffin to see if there's any sort of a mechanism that could possibly fit inside of it because I'm a watchmaker. Is there anything in there? No. Okay. So now I'm going to move the coffin off of its resting point, and I'm going to see if there's like a platform underneath it or some kind of pressure plate or something like that. Okay. No. I'm going to scour all the walls. I'm going to do like Metal Gear Solid thing where you tap against every single, or like Manhunt or whatever, tap against every single wall. Is there any sort of differences in wall density? No, because he's telling me. I thought that was kind of like a hint, and it wasn't. It was just him being kind of an aspie, I guess, about the rules. But so now we're scouring these rooms again because he's explained the rules in a really fucked up way. Nothing really happens. He's making us rest even though we haven't. So there's a time basis for all this stuff, which I totally agree with, but we didn't cross really enough distance that it could have possibly even taken an hour. So even though searching takes a certain amount of time. So that was kind of ridiculous. And that extinguishes one of your light sources, so we lost a torch doing that. Mostly our problem, but I think that's partially to do with the fact the module is really fucking boring. We went to this big metal door, I think it was. It might have been stone, but it was gigantic, way taller than a person. So something's in there. I'm like, okay, it might be like a minotaur or some shit. That's what, I didn't say that in character, but that's what I'm thinking, right? That's what I'm sure the 5e players who played before were like, oh shit, we're going to fight something. It's going to be interesting. Open the door, take the bar off the door. At this point, we've maybe gone like 100 meters or something. Take the bar off the door, walk inside. There's 3 coffins, 3 more boring coffins on that side of the room. And some of the coffins had some kind of like gas trap in them. When we were messing with the ones earlier, and it was really kind of ineffectual. So we start going to the coffins to go inspect, like prepared for traps or whatever. They open. So an hour, maybe 2 hours into the session, we finally get to fight something. It's animated skeletons. I was one of the people who was prying it because I had a crowbar because he's a pawn shop owner. So Victor opens the coffin, and the female fighter barbarian bitch is opening one of the coffins with me as well. And we pop them open. Actual skeletons come out to fight, like animate skeletons. And I think I survived 2 turns because I was a thief who was now getting into combat because everyone else was kind of hanging back. Maybe that's my fault for being too far out, but I go down. As you do when you play old school D&D games, you have like, I think I rolled max health, but I only had like 5 or 6 HP. It's D4, but I had plus con, so I think I took 1 hit. He rolled max. I'm dead. That's fine. So I start rolling up another character. And it was kind of an awkward session, but I decided I'd play with the next week. The next week, due to scheduling conflicts, the people didn't end up playing, which was kind of awkward because I was told that the DM said that I would miss the next week, but I could kind of introduce myself when they got out of the dungeon or to a town or something. So the next character that I made, their name was Saturn, and they were a level 1 cleric. So they didn't really have a super strong affiliation to their god, but they were a family member of Victor, the first character I was playing, the thief. So 2 weeks pass, and then the session that I'm going to talk about that should have been cut short happens. So I get in, and we have 2 of the players back. I believe it was a fighter and a magic user, as well as, so it's the clown-looking fighter, and a magic user. They might have been some other kind of thing, but they knew about magic and treasure. Their character wasn't well enough defined for me to actually remember what class they are, which is kind of a problem, but so that's there. And then we had this other player who had joined. They might have been there in the first session, but they were so quiet and just didn't say anything, and it was very difficult to engage them. So I don't remember if they were in the first session or not, but they were a martial class of some kind as well. There was no really strong magic user. And we start playing at the point where Victor just died, so I need to abruptly show up, right? This other player character walks in, the woman who just joined our game, who was really, really quiet. We'll call her Quiet Girl or something. For the rest, I'll try to refer to them as that. So they enter with the fighter and the magic user, and then I enter as well as a cleric. And I rolled 3 for charisma, but like 18 for like strength and con. So this dude is like built fucking so huge. He's probably the biggest guy that anyone has ever seen, but he can barely, it's not that he can barely talk, he's just very anti-charismatic. Like he just sucks the life out of the room when he walks in. And he starts looking through his cousins, his dead cousin's stuff. He starts looking through Victor's stuff. The DM told me that I'm not allowed to take the possessions of my previous character, and that other party members who were in the party with the person who died, like, can't even take their torches and shit, which is really weird, but I guess he expected so many people to die that maybe we would start just, like, team killing each other in order to get more equipment at player building, which I've never seen, character building. Yeah, really weird. So I couldn't take anything, but I looked through his stuff to see if he had any personal effects, which he didn't, but it's his cousin, right? So he's looking for stuff. And the other party members just have to accept that I'm there, and we're going to continue the dungeon. So we end up walking. We find another statue. It's like a frog statue or something. We move it. I'm still the mapper at this point, but everyone else has kind of... I don't want to say checked out of the game. That's not true of one of the players. But so we have one 5e player, one completely new player, and one player who doesn't talk. And then me, who likes to talk. So there was a certain point where nobody was saying anything for like 4 minutes. The stretches of silence are going way longer than the first because we've lost players and we've reshuffled players, and this is pretty much a different party with only 2 members that survived from the original. So it's already shit. Like. And the DM has done nothing to help explain, which is fine if you're playing like a really like beer and pretzel style, which I think he was trying to, but there's just no creative energy to this game, which is what you need if you're going to randomly introduce new players, or new player characters rather. So we walk down a hallway. It's boring. There's some kind of description. I'm drawing the rooms. The DM's telling me no, that's not right because diagonal square is actually a different number of feet, and he's giving me these very exact, like, 38.5-foot explanations. Okay. We go into a room that has this big frog statue, and there's a stream that's running under it, because there's a break in the floor, and I can see that there's, or whoever walked in there first in the marching order could see that there is some kind of a river of liquid moving underneath it. Cool. And I'm trying to, because I've played other BX modules. I've played a shitload of BX modules before, so I'm kind of privy to the tropes of this stuff. So I'm trying to take kind of a backseat. Like, I'll move us to the place, but I want the other players to kind of engage and solve problems. So even with my 3 charisma, I'm like, trying to find a way for somebody who's very anti-charismatic to ask for help, right? And out of character, I'm saying, like, okay, does anyone else have any ideas, right? No one comes up with anything. I say, okay, we're just going to push the statue. So we push the statue. The opening's large enough that we can jump in. Great. Jump down. We're now in another boring hallway with nothing in it. Walk into, the hallway widens in kind of like a conical, the walls gradually get wider. And there are, like, a million more statues. The same fucking statues we've been seeing already. Just a bunch of them. And one of them has an opening behind it. But it's already been like moved out of the way, so we didn't even have to find it. None of the other statues have anything interesting. Cool. Go through the opening. Go into another room. We start just opening more doors. As more doors open, there's other rooms full of statues with nothing interesting. Like, some of them had like arrows. One of them was like a warrior or something, and they had a bow, and it made out of clay or something like that. But there were arrows in their quiver. So we got 3 arrows, and none of us have a bow. Cool. We continue to walk into more and more rooms with absolutely nothing interesting in them. The party is just going more and more and more silent. No one's fucking, like, at this point, I'm just trying to get us to fight something or have, like, a character die or something. Like, I'm not trying to get myself killed or anything, but I'm trying to give the DM something to work with, right? Like, a cleric is actually a very good character. There's no paladins in the basic Dungeons & Dragons, but a cleric is kind of a proto-paladin if you're playing them as like a very lawful kind of type, because they will attempt to, or the generic stereotype is that they will attempt to just like walk into a room and kind of announce that they're there, or what I was trying to do, because he has so low charisma, I was trying to behave kind of like British officers were expected to in like World War I and II, where they're supposed to have like a very casual contempt for danger, which is funny when you're level 1, because you will just die. But I was trying to stare down every trap and stuff to try to give the DM some kind of reason to give us something to sink our teeth into. And so we're going through rooms of statues with nothing interesting. I'm inspecting like every one. We're wasting even more time and more torches and stuff because there's nothing in the dungeon pretty much. We go into a room that has scrolls on the floor, and I can identify them as clerical scrolls, but clerics can't even use spells until 2nd level. And in this session, if you couldn't tell, we haven't fought anything yet. So I'm not even gaining XP towards another level, which is, so I just have scrolls for no reason. And the character's probably not going to make it because they're level 1. So we're doing that. And eventually Quiet Girl kind of, hear like rustling and shit from her, we're playing on Roll20, so from her microphone, and she kind of just gets up and leaves. And we're all like, what the fuck's going on? Anyway, so she was like, had to take fucking anxiety medication or some shit. And then we ended up having this like, or I don't really care, but they were having this like big conversation about fucking like head meds and shit for hours. That was unnecessary as fuck. And so, but the interesting thing is, from that conversation we started talking about other stuff. Like we started talking about somehow it transferred into like Mexican food in the local area of one of the players, and we're talking about that. And then we're talking about the older versions of D&D and stuff for a couple minutes while she was away. And these guys are actually fun to talk to. And there was so much energy in that conversation that I'm really shocked that there was so little when we were playing the game that's supposed to be like a catalyst for social interaction as well, which means that the DM or the module or something isn't very good, or it's being run very poorly, right? Sometimes if you run those basic and advanced D&D modules like as they're written right out of the book, they're kind of lifeless. So you have to put, if you realize that you're losing the party right now, you have to put something in to make it more interesting. When I run, where is it? I was just running Keep on the Borderlands recently. I'll hold it up because I'm kind of proud that I have it. Keep on the Borderlands. One of the classic modules, Module B2. When I run this module, there's a map here. I'll try to zoom the camera and see if you can see it. There's a map there. My module is kind of falling apart. It's been around a long time. But I like to, whenever I run new players through it, kind of take a section of the map and what's the word I'm looking for? Not redraw, but reconnect the caves that are outside of the keep that you kind of go dungeoneering in. I like to redraw these dungeons and caves so that they connect into each other in different ways each time that I run it. So like there's an owl bear encounter and there's orcs and shit. And it would be kind of boring if you just went and you fought one of those factions on their own and you played the dungeon as written. But maybe there is like simultaneously an owl bear rampaging through there, and I've broken down walls and I've redrawn everything to make it a little bit more of a stimulating experience. I don't think that this DM had that much thought for the flow of how this dungeon would run. So it was very sterile when we were playing it. But these people were actually good to talk to. So after that break, we got back to playing. Cultural differences aside, obviously you can tell with some contempt that I mentioned the subjects of conversation. But aside from that, now the players were talking amongst each other. I had stuff to work off of now. I could actually talk to the other player characters and get good information. And I really feel like things are flowing well until we enter this big like hexagonal room. And it's got like a door on each wall with a big iron door right opposite where we come in. So we go down here, and there is more statues. Nothing effectual. Great. The DM gets up to go take a piss, and when he goes, the other players are still on the mic, and I say like something to the effect of, you enter the door to your bathroom. There's 27 and a half clay statues of no real significance. And other players are dying laughing, so they know this is shit too. Next room, it's like half finished because somebody was like excavating it. There's nothing interesting there except for a pickaxe, which I stole. We go to the next room, and there's like destroyed beds. Great. Next room. I don't even remember what's in there. Next room. There is a pile of rubble, and there's a skeleton that is behind the pile of rubble who has like a ring or something, but he's behind a pile of rubble, and we just kind of took pot shots at him, and that encounter is really retarded because the skeleton was trying to like push his battle axe or whatever he had through the rubble to hit people who walked up to the rubble, but like a zombie, you know how zombies are in like the Walking Dead graphic novels where they'll just sort of glom onto shit and they won't stop, or like if you played like Call of Duty Nazi Zombies, right, when they're ripping down the barriers, they're just doing that regardless if you're shooting them or not. He's not doing that. He has like some kind of fucking sentience, and he's just like he's dodging like Resident Evil 4, and so it's just shitty. That's really boring, so we can't kill him. We go to the next room, and here's something that's really cool that is in this module. There's a trap where if you step on a pressure plate, there is like a plate-shaped fucking circular blue disc that will shoot a bolt of electricity at you if you roll poorly. And it's a magical device. So somehow we formulated a plan. This is players being creative. You should be. The DM, I think, was actually happy when we started doing this. We got like a pole arm, and we got somebody in past the pressure plates, and we yanked the blue disc, this lightning shooting fucking laser disc, pretty much. Not literally not like it was laser disc shaped, yes, but it shot like lightning, like it was a fucking Spartan laser or something. So we go get that, and we mount it onto a javelin or like a 10-foot pole or something. So that way you could hold it like a what would it be? A wand of fucking thunderbolt or something like that. A lightning shooting rod, and it's a magical device. So there's no actual gear mechanism that connects it with the pressure plate, which is cool. So we go back to where the skeleton is, and it's kind of like waving its battle axe. And it kind of always has to take like one shot before trying to retreat. So instead of shooting it with like a sling or throwing a rock at it or whatever we'd been doing previous, we have somebody hold this javelin with the lightning plate on it, and somebody goes steps on the trap. And we do it a bunch of times because traps only have a certain chance of activation. Sometimes it's 1 in 6, sometimes it's 4 in 6, whatever. So the DM is for some reason wanting to roll behind his screen for it still, even though we've kind of commandeered this trap, so I think he should have let us roll for it to see if it works. But we keep trying it over and over, and I guess it was a one-time use trap or something like that, because it just doesn't fire again. But that was a gigantic buzzkill to pretty much the entire party, because we'd actually had kind of a creative moment, and he won't even let us kill the skeleton for it. Also, I was a cleric, and I tried to use Turn Undead, and the skeleton had, I rolled like an 11 or a 12, and the skeleton had 3 hit dice, I guess. So as a first level cleric, I can't kill it or make it turn away to like sneak in and like start whacking it. So this encounter is just retarded, because there's no reason that we were going to want to go actually there to fight it just for a ring, but we can't use the person who fights undead can't fight it. So there's no cool cleric moment there. Our ingenuity with this trap doesn't reward us, because I believe in playing like rules as written and shit too, but the way that he was playing up this trap made it seem like it should work, which was disappointing. We had new players too, and it is kind of clown shoes to allow that to happen, but if you couldn't tell, this game was kind of already disorganized as it was. I'm not trying to argue that should have worked. I would have just ignored it if I was playing on my own. Ignored the skeleton, ignored the trap, and just kept going towards whatever like the final boss would be. But the other players had fun with that. I wish that something more constructive could have come out of that. And there was no other way to defeat the skeleton. We tried a bunch of stuff. But what the DM wanted us to do, I guess, would be to like excavate the rubble, let the skeleton hit us, and then walk in and then fight the skeleton. But we'd realized during the first session, or these new players especially realized in the first session, that this is a very high lethality game. So they're actually trying to play smart. Everyone's trying to play smart. So we just ignore the encounter. We go to, there's a staircase that forms some sort of, it's got like a trap or something in it. We try to roll stones down the staircase. We go down the staircase, nothing bad happens, and then we hit a boss room. And at that point, the session finally kind of ends. And the session ends with the DM. He had a very, not grating. I don't like to criticize people's voice because I don't really like my own very much. But his voice was very, it was monotone, but it had like a very like sniping edge to it when he was trying to be sarcastic or something. And this really, it didn't bother me too much, but I know that it bothered some of the other players because nobody said anything for a long time after he said it, where he said, yes, you got loot, but you didn't succeed any encounters or something, so you all get no experience for this session, which is kind of a slap in the face because we were like going out of our way looking for something to fight. And he only gave us one skeleton that pretty much would have been hitting pseudo attacks of opportunity on us. And that would have been the only thing that you could fight. Now gold, getting gold to a town counts for experience in older versions of Dungeons and Dragons. So in theory, we did pick up like very minor loot items. So we could have gained like a couple for our whole party. But then we just get told, yeah, you get no experience. And this is a session that probably should have been cut at one of those rooms with the statues. Probably during the second session. As a dungeon master, I'm a very experienced dungeon master, we'll say, but I don't think that I'm very good. And I'm gonna give an example right after this about my own failings in this regard as well. So don't just think that I'm criticizing without trying to give constructive solutions or experiences where my own follies are relevant as well. But it's very, very frustrating to players, especially newer players, to just kind of walk into rooms with nothing in them for long periods of time. You're just constantly burning all your torches. You start feeling pressured to do something, like to find whatever the DM wants you to find, because he's not like giving you anything, so you're wondering if you're going insane. And you start searching rooms over and over, trying to like find the combat encounter, find the other trap that you didn't find the loot. Nothing for the whole session. And I think at the point where there was a room, what was it? There's a hallway with like 18 statues. There was a room with like 20 something. There was another room with a bunch. If I was the DM to try to keep the game going, I think I would have started to change the rooms or shorten the dungeon, or while people were discussing something, maybe like take a 15-minute break, or while other people are distracted, kind of look up like another module, look up part of Keep on the Borderlands, look up something like that, Demon Web Pits, find some kind of interesting monster that could be in there, come up with a journal that we find about somebody who used to live there, right? Try to somehow keep the players mentally invested, find something that we would find to keep players interested. And this is I think the preferable solution. Try to keep the game going, because then you just have a weak opener, but you at least hold interest through. Like if you pick up in the middle of a session, actually, that's not so bad, because that's when the players start to get comfortable with doing their ridiculous voices, and having a good middle section of your session with a bad beginning and ending actually isn't too bad. So that's what I would try to do. Just start trying to change the dungeon, or to run the game in a more expressive way, or do something to really keep your players mentally engaged with the game. So if you do end up with like a really awkward session like this, and you aren't creative enough, or you don't feel like it's possible to salvage the session, like if you're playing a serious game, some kind of a serious campaign with actual stakes, and you made a session that just sucks ass, which happens all the time, and everyone's done it who's ever DM'd. Don't feel alone if you DM a session and it sucks. Like I've DM'd a shitload of sessions, and a bunch of them were fucking god awful. So never for a second think that people who've been playing for a long time, or even like people who are quote unquote professional DMs, have never run a bad session. Not saying that I'm one, but people look at DM Johnny, or probably like Chris Perkins, or those guys on WebDM and shit. They've run shitty sessions too. Never for a second think that you're alone in making a shitty session. And if you think that you cannot save it, and you've played for a sufficient amount of time, or you don't want to waste anyone's time, one really good solution is just ending the session. Or taking a long hiatus and kind of just being like, look, we might want to play something else, or something like that. And this is shitty, but you're going to you're going to keep actually a lot of respect in the minds of the players for doing this. And this is something that I've had to do a few times as well. When I haven't been able to salvage the session, because like the stakes are such that players could die, or it's supposed to be kind of a narrative-focused thing, or it's the first session with new characters, and it really wouldn't matter if I cancel the session anyway. Trying to stagger through sometimes isn't possible, and sometimes you just have to end it. So I'm gonna give an example of that I personally fucked up. So this was a game of Pathfinder First Edition, the only good edition of Pathfinder, sometime in like 2011, 2012. My group of friends had just gotten into playing Pathfinder. I think it was their first role-playing game that they'd played. One of the guys had played like Rogue Trader, Warhammer Rogue Trader, the role-playing game before, or maybe was that even out in 2011? I think it might have been. Or he'd played Warhammer Fantasy. Maybe he'd played both, because we did play Rogue Trader with him later, and he was actually really fucking good at Rogue Trader, so I think that he'd played it before. But we were playing Pathfinder. They were playing the beginner box. One of my friends was DMing. He was actually doing a really good job, because the beginner box for Pathfinder is kind of shitty. It has really good pawns, and the actual physical implements of play, dice and stuff, great. Did a good job. They comes with a map board, which a lot of starter sets for games don't. Great, I love it. The dungeon itself sucks. It's really bad. It makes no sense. Like, the ecosystem of the dungeon is retarded. The characters in it don't make any sense. So he was changing things on the fly and doing a really good job. And I showed up. We kind of extended that into a little bit of a campaign, and that went kind of well. But he wanted to play because he hadn't gotten to play yet. So I said, like, I'll run some games. Because I'd played a lot of like first edition D&D, second edition, third edition, and shit. So I felt confident that I could run a game for them. And I think that I hyped it up a little bit too much. We ended up doing a one-shot that was really good. And then I wanted to run sort of a more advanced campaign. So we started the game. I'd thought all this stuff up. I made the mistake of kind of making the game, because D&D can be played as a very linear game, and it's actually not bad to play as a linear game, where you kind of are just like, here's where the dungeon goes. There's a certain number of paths, but you have to stay in the dungeon, right? So it's a very linear game in that sense, but I kind of just didn't fill in any of the details. So it's like they were going backstage if they even went like 1 foot off of the beaten path, kind of like playing fucking Uncharted 2 or something. And so we started, I wanted to have this cool sequence. I wanted to play like music and stuff on a laptop. I did, where there's like a big tower. And there's like an enemy army or something's in the tower, and they've got like cannons or trebuchets, and they're basically shooting fucking artillery at your convoy as you go in. And you are 4 people that survived, and you're kind of like mercenaries or knights or something, and you're at the bottom of this tower, and you kind of go up and you fight. And I wanted it to be kind of reminiscent of something like Metal Gear Solid or Resident Evil 4, where you're sort of on your own, cut off, and you're kind of killing the enemy from inside of their home field. And I had some really great ideas for combat encounters and all kinds of stuff. I thought it was going to be really, really cool. So the artillery hits the party when we're playing, and I'm playing this like cool music with this like staccato fucking drum beat, and the drums, I have stop when I stop explaining this artillery strike that's coming in. And that's when the players are like kind of dazed and unconscious, like Saving Private Ryan, the fucking ringing in your ears, right? And I start like another song, and they run to the base of the mountain, right? So that they can't be hit with this ordnance if the enemy even knows that they lived. And they're at the base. And the base of this big, gigantic fucking Tower of Babel-sized enemy encampment is, as with medieval villages and stuff, it's got like little like villages and shit outside of it. So they're looking through like destroyed houses and things. And I thought they were gonna like get right onto this ramp and start kind of going up. And they didn't, and I should have prepared for this, because I'm very obsessed with like when I'm playing any kind of character, I like to have my character has like interests and things that they study. So I'll always end up like walking into a bar and asking exactly what are all the items on the menu, or going to a bookshelf and asking like what's the best book that I see on the shelf, and I always expect the DM to know. And generally when I'm the DM, I do know, but these guys started looking through the houses, which I hadn't statted, and I didn't bring like any of the random loot tables from the older D&D games or anything, and I was just so taken aback by it that I was like, I don't know. They were like, oh, okay, whatever, I'm not supposed to go in the houses. Started going up, and they had like a combat encounter, and the guys were like outside of this shack, and the enemies were outside of this shack. They killed them, they go into the shack, and I hadn't planned out what was going to be in this shack. And they walk in, and they were like, what's in there? And I was kind of like trying to fumble around, because this is like such basic shit. I should have known that there's like, this guy had his cloak on the wall, and it was drying, and there's a fire, and they were eating, so there's like ration boxes there, and just some kind of like shitty basic description. But I was so taken aback that they asked about that it was, again, I don't know. Very awkward. I'm playing with this new group. My last session was really good. So they're like starting to get really confused. They had a druid who was like obsessed with like water shit. So there's like an ocean kind of like right off of the side of this spire that they're starting to ascend. And I forget what he's doing, handle animal, speak with beasts, something like that. I forget what level they were. So he could have communicated with this animal, but I made this like species of whales that have like a big skull protrusion thing because they're used to extremely high currents and they can kind of anchor themselves to walls. And there's this pod of whales that's hanging out off the side of the mountain. And he's like, oh, whales are really smart. I can talk to the whale, and then I can have it tell me if there's enemies on a higher level, or if there's maybe like an entrance underneath that we can like swim in and have them help us and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, this is really good. And he rolls and fails that. And the whale stares at him, and he stares at the whale. So far, I've just told the party, like, you should never just tell your players yes, but you should never just not have you should never just not have flavor text or not have a game set up correctly. Like, this wasn't an example of the players asking too much. This is an example of the DM not preparing enough at all, or not imagining how he himself would play through this space. So I'm saying, no, I don't know, because I'm an idiot, basically twice, maybe more than twice. And then they try to do a handle animal, do the druid thing, and it doesn't work. And I'm looking at my players, and they look really fucking already checked out. It's only been like 40 minutes. And I'm there, and I'm like, okay, we're just going to play something else. And I fold up the DM screen. I'm like, sorry, it's fucking complete power outage. I just fucked this. And all my friends were like kind of disappointed, but they were like, yeah, this is actually a good decision. And I forget what it was. We downloaded a PDF for some other adventure module, and I ran a game. I forget what system it was in. It might have been like a 3.0 campaign or something, or 3.0 one-shot that we just played with Pathfinder, and it went well. Next time that we played, I think next time I DM'd also went really well. So it was just kind of a fluke. But since then, I've had some players from that game who I'm not like absolutely best friends with all of them, so it's not just because I'm their friend or whatever, but I've had some people that I played with during that session tell me that like that was actually really good, and that that really improved their own DMing when they started doing it later, or if they already were. That was sort of an important moment for them, because they realized that sometimes you fuck things up, and you, out of respect for other people's time, need to end a game. So hopefully, how long are we going now? Almost an hour? Perfect. I wanted this to be long, so if you're playing a video game or something, you don't have to skip through, or you don't have to just switch between videos or set up a playlist or anything for yourself. But in conclusion, I just want to reiterate that if you are the DM, you are not locked into playing. If it's a pre-made session, or even if you've written notes and stuff for yourself down, you are not locked into playing everything exactly as it's written. Failing that, if you can't make a session interesting for your players to a reasonable degree, if you have like insatiable players that just expect too much of you, that's not your fault. But if you cannot correctly, if you cannot run a game well for the session, when it's going to be like a 3 or a 4 hour game, and you cannot modify the session on the fly in order to fix whatever issues you're having, it's completely acceptable for you to stop the game. If you have another game in your bag or something, and play that. It's not even that unusual. The people, I think, get into this mentality where the DM is sort of this like responsible entertainer for people for a long period of time, almost like you're hosting like a house party or something. You can't just kick everyone out 40 minutes after they show up or something like that. You feel somehow responsible, and that's not necessarily true, because Dungeons and Dragons, every version of it, even the shitty versions like 5th, and other role-playing games, are a narrative experience, and they're a social experience, and they're a game experience, but they also require this phenomenal time investment. And over time, you will have people evaluate you as like a dungeon master and a player and stuff. And if you are wasting people's time frequently trying to salvage shitty games, they will think far less of you and want you to run games and play games with them, far less than if you just had like a bad day one day, canceled the session, did something else to thank people for showing up, right? You played Warhammer with them or whatever. Play if you're playing Pathfinder or something, maybe you have a copy of Old School Essentials or something. You play an easier to play game like that for that session, and then you come back strong in the next one. If you respect people's time like that consistently, they will be more enthusiastic about playing with you in the future. And that's why I said earlier in this video that I'm not sure if I want to keep playing in this game. Because the DM actually, from a book knowledge perspective, understands the rules very well, and he's actually good to talk to. And, or at least in terms of knowledge, again, with the voice and the weird choices, I don't know, but good to talk to about the game. And even if I'm not really loving a game, if I've signed up for it, I like to at least finish the dungeon that I'm in before saying if I'm in or out. So this is very unusual that I'm contemplating leaving a game half-finished like this. But that's because this DM and to an extent some of the players are wasting my time. Or at least not making an acceptable level of return on investment for my time. So don't start to think about your D&D game or fucking Shadowrun or whatever like it is some sort of like a job that you have and you have to be returning a certain amount of entertainment for however many hours put in by your players. But at the same time, don't forget that people can get bored. You can be running a bad game, and people can feel spurned that you are wasting their Saturday night or their Friday night, or just 4 hours of their time on a day, even if they had nothing else to do. It is disrespectful. It is annoying. And you shouldn't make a habit out of doing it, even if you feel obligated to save the game.